In 1936, 7 million German boys became soldiers in waiting overnight by law. Most only dreamed of parades and marksmanship badges, but as the Reich's war machine devoured men, these teenagers were thrown into some of history's bloodiest battles. The official story ignores how a nation's children became its last line of defense and what it cost them. How does a society turn boys into soldiers, and what happened when youth ran out? A single law passed in December 1936 swept nearly every German boy into the ranks of the Hitler Youth. Attendance was no longer a choice. By 1939, membership approached 7.7 million, covering more than 4 out of every 5 eligible boys. Skipping meetings or failing to enroll could mean fines or even prosecution for a family. Week after week, uniforms replaced street clothes, and wooden rifles gave way to real ones. Rifle schools, established across Germany by 1937, trained over 1 million boys in live-fire marksmanship before their 16th birthday. By 1939, more than 50,000 had earned the coveted Hitler Youth Marksmanship Medal. The program's reach extended far beyond sports or camping trips. Marching drills, grenade-throwing practice, and field maneuvers became routine, supervised by officers who treated these camps as a junior army. The message was clear: every German boy would be physically fit, disciplined, and ready to serve. Youth leaders, themselves barely out of their teens, enforced the rules with the authority of state officials. In this world, military training was as normal as math class. By the time war arrived, the difference between a childhood game and a soldier's duty had all but disappeared. When German troops crossed into Poland on September 1, 1939, the war began with a speed and force that stunned the world. In a matter of weeks, Poland fell. Months later, the same tactics, fast-moving tanks, coordinated airstrikes, and relentless infantry broke through Belgium and the Netherlands, then swept into France. By June 1940, Paris had surrendered. It took just 6 weeks for the German army to topple a nation that had stood firm through 4 years of the previous war. Newspapers across Germany printed maps showing new borders almost overnight. For millions of young Germans, especially those in uniform or still in training, these victories felt like proof that discipline and preparation could conquer anything. The word Blitzkrieg, meaning lightning war, became part of everyday language, echoing in classrooms and youth camps. Letters home from older brothers and neighbors described columns of tanks rolling through conquered towns and German flags rising over city halls from Warsaw to Paris. In June 1941, the invasion of the Soviet Union pushed even deeper, capturing vast territories and millions of prisoners. The sense of invincibility was everywhere. For the youth watching from the sidelines, war seemed like a test they had already been prepared to pass. But as the front lines stretched further and the victories piled up, few could imagine how quickly the tide would turn. By early 1943, the German army faced a crisis that could no longer be hidden. On the Eastern Front, the defeat at Stalingrad cost nearly 300,000 men, soldiers who would never return. In Berlin, military planners sifted through casualty reports that grew heavier each month. The numbers told a simple story: the Wehrmacht was bleeding faster than it could be replenished. Internal memoranda circulated between the Army High Command and the Ministry of the Interior, warning that available replacements had dropped below 1 million, with no sign of relief. The usual sources, older reservists and wounded men returning from hospitals, were exhausted. In February 1943, new orders arrived. The minimum age for military service would be lowered to 17. Boys born in 1926, many still in school, now received conscription notices. The July 1943 decree formalized this change, drafting the youngest cohort yet into frontline units. What began as a temporary measure soon became standard policy. The machinery of recruitment shifted gears, and a generation raised in youth camps was summoned to fill the ranks left empty by war. In June 1943, trains delivered thousands of 17-year-olds to the Beverloo training grounds in Belgium. They arrived as products of years of drills and discipline, but now faced a new reality: the formation of a true armored division. The 12th SS Panzer Division, named Hitlerjugend, drew its core from these young men, most born in 1926. Veteran officers from the Eastern Front set the tone. Every day began before sunrise with forced marches, weapons assembly, and tank maintenance. The camp's parade grounds echoed with shouted commands and the grinding of tank engines. Panther and Panzer IV tanks, fresh from German factories, lined the fields. There were 66 Panthers in the 1st Battalion alone. Each crew drilled for hours, learning to load shells, repair engines, and coordinate attacks. Instructors, many with scars from Stalingrad, demanded absolute obedience. Training accidents were common, but the pace never slowed. The division could field over 100 armored vehicles and support units within weeks, all manned by teenagers whose childhoods had ended in uniform. The focus shifted from preparation to readiness for combat as rumors spread of an impending Allied invasion to the west. By late August 1944, the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend was a shattered remnant of its former self. From an original strength of nearly 20,000, just 600 exhausted survivors remained. The division's armored spearhead, once boasting over 100 tanks, had been reduced to a handful. Only 10 were still capable of moving or fighting. Each day in Normandy brought more losses, not just from direct combat, but from relentless Allied bombing runs and artillery barrages that tore through defensive lines and supply convoys alike. Reports from the period detail how entire platoons vanished overnight, caught in the open by Typhoon rockets or crushed beneath collapsing buildings. The division's war diary, kept by staff officers, shifted from recording orders and maneuvers to tallying the missing and dead. For the teenage soldiers who survived, the numbers were impossible to ignore. Friends who had trained side by side at Beverloo were gone. The human cost of 3 months in Normandy was measured not in medals or ground gained, but in the silence left behind. The collapse was total and irreversible. December 1944, Germany launched a final offensive through the frozen forests of the Ardennes. Rebuilt divisions, including the battered 12th SS Panzer Division, pushed forward with teenagers at their core, many still just 18 years old. Their tanks and trucks crawled through deep snow, burning precious fuel that could not be replaced. Allied air attacks, once grounded by winter fog, soon returned to pound the columns. Ammunition ran low, and supply convoys broke down in ice and mud. As the offensive stalled, commanders scraped together the last reserves, boys and old men alike, to fill the gaps. The failure in the Ardennes left Germany's western front broken, and the call went out to defend the homeland at any cost. On September 25, 1944, a single order swept across Germany. Every male between 16 and 60 was now conscripted into the Volkssturm, a home defense force born out of crisis. In Berlin, boys as young as 14 received armbands and Panzerfausts, their training compressed into a few frantic hours. By April 1945, the city braced for the Soviet onslaught. 2.5 million Red Army soldiers, backed by thousands of tanks and guns, pressed in from every direction. Teenagers took up positions in subway tunnels and shattered buildings, facing seasoned Soviet troops with little more than handheld anti-tank weapons and borrowed uniforms. The capital's defense had become a last stand fought street by street, with the youngest bearing a burden far beyond their years. Over 12,000 members of the 12th SS Panzer Division were killed or wounded before the war's end. A single unit's losses reflecting a national disaster for Germany's youngest generation. Studies by historians like Rüdiger Overmans confirm that tens of thousands of teenagers, many not yet 18, died in the final year of fighting. Teenagers were swept into frontline combat with devastating consequence. The reckoning did not end with the armistice. In December 1945, Division Commander Kurt Meyer stood trial for war crimes after the execution of Canadian prisoners near Caen. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison, a verdict that cast a long shadow over those who had led boys into battle. The statistics and courtroom verdicts leave no doubt. The cost of transforming youth into soldiers was paid in both lost lives and enduring moral consequence. Even today, armed conflicts continue to pull minors into battle, despite international law. The legacy of Germany's lost generation endures as a warning. When ideology and desperation collide, childhood itself becomes collateral. History does not just record these choices, it asks what we are willing to accept now. Share your thoughts below.